Hello again, and welcome back to another insightful episode on all things coaching in higher education. I'm your host, Tim Jansa, a certified leadership and organizational development coach and a higher ed professional of almost 20 years. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into one area of campus life that, for many, is often synonymous with an institution and its brand, namely college athletics and the leaders who run these programs. It's a world with unique challenges, as well as tremendous pressures, expectations, and opportunities, and one where leadership coaching can have an outsized impact, as we will see. To help us better understand athletic operations and its leaders, I have invited Tanya Vogel, a former athletic director and associate vice president of athletics at the George Washington University. She's also an experienced executive coach, as well as the founder and principal of Ripple Impact Coaching and Consulting. So let's buckle in and explore how professional coaching can help build stronger athletic programs for our colleges and universities. Welcome, Tanya. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Tim, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So let's get the 700-pound gorilla out of the room. So first things first, when most people, hear that I'm a coach, of course, immediately their mind goes to sports coaching and they say, which team are you coaching and so forth. So for somebody completely uninitiated, how would you explain the difference between the two? So athletic coaching and of course the kind of executive professional coaching that we're talking about in this series.
Tim, I really appreciate the question. And you can imagine, as somebody that spent 15 years of her career coaching,
Yeah.
I've had to do a lot of explaining about how my previous life and the coaching I was doing there, sport coaching, is different from my current life. And I do think anytime we bring up the word coach, there's images that come into people's heads, whether those are a coach with a whistle around their neck or a whiteboard or practice planning, or even wild, crazy responses to a competition. And the way I would describe the difference, obviously, in sport coaching, there's a lot of teaching of skills and directing strategy. A coach is charged with having a vision and then moving that team in accordance with that vision. And as you and I both know, executive coaching is really more about being a thought partner. We show up knowing that our clients have all the answers. And it's our job as an executive coach or a leadership coach to help ask insightful questions, offer perspectives, really create a space where those leaders can reflect, where they can grow, where they can unlock their own solutions and have ownership over the solutions that they create. Now, something that I think is important to point out, Tim, I believe the best sport coaches are using many of the tools that you and I are using in executive coaching. Because if you're doing it really well as a sport coach, you're helping those athletes unlock in the same way that we're trying to help our leaders unlock.
Thank you for bringing up that analogy. I think this is something that also went through my mind, not just in preparation for this conversation, but while you were outlining, the differences and similarities, there's definitely some overlap. And from what I have heard, with friends, family, colleagues, whenever athletic coaching comes up and some of them do coach, it seems like the competencies are definitely uh, there where a lot of what we're trying to activate in our clients will also make a good athletic coach. So thank you so much for putting this out there. So let's just dig into the world of athletic coaching. So I've done a little bit of digging, obviously. So from what I've found, there are approximately 1,300 collegiate athletic programs in the United States, with about 1,100 governed by the NCAA alone. There is a 2023 report by the Knight Commission, and they projected that by 2032, annual athletic revenues for the 54 major public football bowl subdivision schools will reach $16.7 billion. To me, these are absolutely staggering numbers. And at the same time, many institutions' identities are so tightly interwoven with their athletic program. I'm just thinking about my backyard here, for example, the University of Georgia. So I can only imagine the enormous pressures that athletic leaders face and have to manage somehow.
Yeah, it's true. The information from the Knight Commission is fantastic, and if you think about it, you mentioned I think 54 schools. 54 schools is about what, maybe 4% of the total institutions. And so, what is unique about college athletics is for certain in the SEC, where the University of Georgia plays, and in the Big Ten, and even in the ACC and the Big 12, um, they're synonymous, right? You hear University of Georgia, you're going to think football, and then you're going to think great, great education, great institution. University of Alabama, same thing, right? LSU, same thing. These are schools, many of whom are members of the AAU, high academic research one institutions, but they're known maybe more for their football program than those academic accolades, at least at the outset. Um, but the majority of us, right? The majority of us in terms of Division One, two, or three are highly subsidized by the institution. And so when you hear terms like, or you hear things about big budget, $16 billion, um, that really is reserved for a very small part of our population. And yet, college athletics is a very visible piece to any institution. And one of the things we'll talk a lot about today is just how that high level of visibility adds a complexity to the leaders of the organizations. Um, and so, yes, what we see on Saturdays and during the fall in terms of football, that's very important to many institutions. But what is equally important is this idea of really broad-based opportunities across many sports, both genders, and also the community that college athletics can build for current students, for alumni, for local communities. It really is, as many people term it, the front porch to an institution. So, lots of value there, and with it comes a lot of pressure.
And I'm so glad you bring this up because I think it's so easy for somebody who is not part of this world, or I have to confess, not a major college sports fan. I know some of
Sure.
our viewers and listeners probably roll their eyes right now. Um, then, it's easy to kind of be blinded by all the flashiness of, the big schools and the big college programs. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes that isn't quite as visible, I think, to many folks. And I also appreciate you really bringing up the idea that many schools subsidize a lot of these programs. So there is a much closer connection between the athletic and the academic side of things, I would
Hmm.
say. Um, so how would you describe a role of a leadership development or executive coach when you're dealing with these quasi mini organizations within the larger university ecosystem? What are some of those, leadership challenges that athletic directors and coaches face? And how do those potentially differ from some of the challenges that more academic leaders would have to deal with?
I love this question, and I'll share a little bit about my journey. I mentioned that I was a sport coach, so I was a student athlete in college. Really loved my experience as both a student and as an athlete, and knew early on in my career that I wanted to be a sport coach. And so I was fortunate enough to be a collegiate coach for 15 years, including 12 as a head coach. And still, my growth in understanding how athletics is tied to higher ed really came towards the end of my coaching career as I started to explore more administrative roles. And so the first thing I'll point out is that one of one of the areas of work that I do with my coaching clients is really helping them as athletics department leaders, including head coaches, is helping them to understand how they fit into the larger landscape of higher ed. And when we start to explore where they fit in, it becomes really powerful for them because they start to understand how better to make decisions to help our friends in enrollment management. how better to make decisions to help our friends in communications, how better to make decisions to help our friends in development and alumni relations. And so as they learn more about where they fit into the large organization of higher ed, they really start to thrive in recognizing those places where athletics can help their colleagues at the table.
Do you find that sometimes you have to help them overcome some internal resistance, misunderstanding as well, especially from academics who may not appreciate the impact and the value that athletic operations brings to campus?
I would say, I probably wouldn't use the word resistance. It's
Mm.
more about what they don't know. And one of the things that I have found in working with individuals that work in athletics is as you start to ask questions and they start to discover on their own how they are part of a larger team. These are people that have been born and raised on teams. And so they understand team sports, and when they recognize that they are part of a larger team, even if members of that team are competing for resources, because that's a place where resistance can exist. But when they start to recognize that, Tim, they start to do what they would do on a sports team is recognize, okay, where are individual strengths? Where are their challenges? Where are there assets that we can work together and collaborate to really move an entire enterprise forward? So I wouldn't call it resistance. It's really about awareness of higher education and really of an institution and the complexities, and then figuring out how they can best work together.
The reason I'm asking this is because I always help my clients, not always, but often help my clients understand the difference between a team and a group. And especially in
Mm,
higher ed, you have so many silos and you have so many people who always say, well, we're a team, but really they're not. They have their own area of responsibility. They kind of work parallel to each other, and there's no interdependency or real interconnectedness between what they're trying to accomplish, and their goals may be quite different.
mm.
So while I can see that athletic leaders might approach this with a real team spirit because that's how they think, that's their mindset, that's how they were raised. I can see that on the administrative or academic side of the house, that may not be reciprocated, and people may kind of hold on to their little turf. Is that something that you have observed as well?
Oh, 100%. And you
Okay.
and I have all worked in organizations where there's a lot of silos.
Yeah.
And so this is where working with leaders in higher ed, um, where there are similarities, right? So if I'm working with somebody that is a chair of a program, or I'm working with somebody that is a leader of, again, enrollment management, or even housing or parking, helping them understand the larger landscape is important. Here's a place where I think college athletics benefits from the power that they have. So going back to our opening where we talked about this high level of visibility, I have found that the athletics department can help nearly everybody on campus in different ways. And so I might be having a conversation in my role as athletics director. I might be having conversation with the dean of the business school, and the dean of the business school is trying to solve a problem, and maybe that problem is people don't know about the business school. And so we say, like, let's talk about how to increase the visibility of the business school. And athletics has this platform. If it's at a football school, you have Saturday football. Okay, how can we help the business school? We can talk about getting business school signage. They can become a corporate partner and such. We can have the dean of the business school, and we did this actually. The dean of the business school spoke on our halftime broadcast. And that broadcast was on NBC Sports Washington at the time, right? So the viewership in the local DMV is it was pretty large. And so there are different ways that athletics can become a microphone, right? Or a megaphone to different areas on campus. I worked at an Ivy League institution when I was much earlier in my career. And the athletics department was an extension of enrollment management, and they partnered on their summer camp program because they understood the earlier that you bring students to your campus and physically get them to the campus, and the more times you get them to the campus, the chance that that student applies and actually ultimately enrolls continue to go up. And so, one of the benefits to athletics that I found, Tim, is that we really can be helpful across the entire enterprise, and when we recognize that and we can collaborate together, it's really powerful.
I'm really intrigued by and not surprised, to be honest, knowing you a little bit, is how you approach this holistically, like a whole systems approach, where to many people, I believe they see this delineation between athletic and academic operations. And I'm really impressed by how you bring these two together and integrate their efforts for the greater good, which then, of course, leads me to believe that while you're working with athletic leaders, I think at the same time, there also needs to be some work done on leaders or with leaders on the administrative or academic side so that they also understand the mutual benefit that they can reap from this collaboration.
Yeah. And Tim, I mean, this goes to a lot of the work that we're doing, helping our clients understand relationships that they need to build,
Yeah.
and then even advocacy. So helping clients advocate for a seat at certain tables, not so their voice is heard, that's important, but so that they can hear the voices of others. And one of the places that I think we found tremendous success with our athletic department clients is helping them understand, hey, go meet them where they're at. Go find out what problem your colleague is trying to solve, and then figure out how your department can help that. I'll use
Mhm.
another example: student affairs. We would be having conversations with the dean of student affairs, and they would be talking about attendance at events that they were putting on. And one of the things that we understood is we can really rally people to show up places, and they were having trouble with attendance at things. And so I said, okay, tell me what events you want people at, and we will work really hard to get them there. It is a way for our student athletes to be amongst their colleagues and feel like a normal student, which is really important to their growth and development. But it's also a way for our student affairs people to have people show up. And so again, getting our clients to understand, hey, listen, you gotta spend some time going out and learning from your colleagues where they are struggling, and then figure out how we can help them solve their problems. And I think this is across all organizations. We can work with bankers, we can work with people in corporate America, and the same thing applies. They need to figure out what their colleagues' pain points are and how they can be collaborative in helping them solve those problems.
You just brought up student growth and development, and in my teaching career, teaching experience at colleges and universities, I have to say I was really impressed by how I would say the vast majority of the student athletes I had in my classes really worked hard
Mm,
and really tried to do the right thing. And I know that some of my colleagues, they might have been a little discouraged by saying, well, the student's going to miss a test because they have a game. It's like, yeah, but they really, they really did a great job and really found a lot of support. I was really impressed by that. I just want to put that out there.
it's great to
Um,
hear.
Tana, so your company is called Ripple Impact Coaching and Consulting. And I would love to hear a little bit about how you see that ripple impact manifest when you're working with leaders in the collegiate academic world, athletic world.
Mm, I appreciate the question. I'll share briefly how I came to that name. As I was going through the coaching program at Georgetown University, I may have shared this with you earlier, but at some point you start to think about, okay, I'm going to start a business. What should this business be called? And as you know, by going through your coaching program, so much of coach education and then so much of the service we provide to our clients is to help them with their emotional intelligence and their self-awareness and their reflection, and then also help them to understand the impact that they are having on others and how others are impacting them, and then how they are reacting. So, the self regulation part of emotional intelligence. And so, the image that continued to come to me was this idea of understanding your ripple. And you can just plop a stone in some still water and we'll see a ripple. That to me is really this idea of understanding what is your ripple? How are you showing up? And then if we see a lot of raindrops on that same still water, we're going to see a bunch of ripples impacting one another. To me, that is the visual of organizations and complex organizations and how they are working off of each other. The work that you and I are doing in terms of coaching, especially when we are working with leaders, we can really have an impact on leaders understanding those concepts I just explained. And if they continue to grow in their emotional intelligence, their self awareness, their reflection, their self regulation, I do believe that that image, right, of all of those raindrops on the still water, that there's just more intentionality around it. And potentially we get more proactive in how we want to impact. We get less reactive. You know this very well. Leaders are under a ton of pressure and things come at them very quickly, and bad things come at them very quickly. And if they don't understand the ripple, or if their response is to be reactionary, that's going to have a huge negative impact on an organization. So I think the work that we're doing really helps our leaders understand how they are showing up and that impact that they're having. And then to take it further, they understand how when bad things happen, bad things are going to come to them. How are they responding and reacting in a way that maybe allows those ripples to be more intentionally prescribed, right? It's you can't predict everything, um, and there's not a playbook for everything, but maybe it's a little bit calmer water for those leaders as they move forward in their organizations.
One and I shared this with you during our last conversation. One of my favorite acronyms now is ROI, but not for return on investment, but really as ripples of impact.
Mm.
And when I heard that, and I have no idea where I heard this, but my mind was blown because I think you and I both have experienced that when that little things we do, we may not even be aware that we do, a word we say, a
Mm.
gesture, um, something small that seems small to us can have a massively outsized positive impact on the people around it, especially on students who are so impressionable and so in many of them in need of guidance.
You know, that when you shared that with me, I was like, I love that our worlds collided, and I'm stealing the new ROI. Um, But you're right. And if we go to education and higher education specifically, one of the things that we remind our leaders of often is we are in the business of education. And with that comes learning and growth, but also comes with it vulnerability. And when we're working with our leaders and we help them understand where vulnerability is um, is powerful in the workplace, I, you know, obviously Brene Brown does a ton of work on this, but Patrick Lencioni does too. I mean,
Mm,
just the levels of trust that can be built with
mm.
vulnerability-based leadership is it's really powerful. And going back to this idea of impact, if we are doing a good job as coaches, helping our clients understand themselves better, they will then understand that ripple of impact that they are having on students and also on their colleagues who are working with students.
Last time you and I talked, you described athletic operations almost as a laboratory. environment for future leaders. And I think this is a great time to bring this up because the students who are in these athletic programs, they learn huge lessons, potentially, at least we hope, right,
Mhm.
for future life. Um, do you care to share a little bit more about that and how maybe we as coaches can help leaders run a better lab, so to speak?
It's such a great question, Tim, and I think, again, when I talk about my own growth, this is an area that I knew I knew about as a student athlete. I knew a little bit more about it as a coach, as a sport coach. I wish I knew more. I was a young head coach, so there was a lot of growth and learning that took place during that part of my career. But if you think about it, in college athletics, these students every single day are showing up for a practice session or a competition where they are going to need to receive inputs from coaches and teammates. They're going to have to work with others. They are going to have to try things that are hard. They are going to fail. They will get real time feedback, both from the sport and from the coach and from their teammates and from fans and parents, right? Nowadays, unfortunately, even from social media, but they're getting feedback on how they are doing. So they have to learn quickly to hopefully decrease the number of failures. um, I started that saying they show up daily, they have discipline, they need to be on time. There's levels of accountability when they don't. They're learning about their own emotional intelligence and how they react to things. Because if they react poorly, let's say they do something after a play, they taunt somebody, there's a penalty for that, right? We even saw this week at the pros, there was a football player that's spit on another football player, and that football player got kicked out of the game. So there are consequences to our actions. Imagine this repeating over and over and over again for 3, 4, 5 years, however long they're in that environment. They're being trained for what comes after college and the workplace. And the data suggests that this learning laboratory is real. And I'll just highlight one of the stats we love to throw out is that 94% of women in the C-suite have played sports in their lives, and 52% of those played in college. And so there's just real power to learning in sport. How can a faculty member recreate this? There's similarities, um, and there are differences. And I would say this is why many student athletes do well in the classroom, because they understand how important it is to show up on time, because they understand that this feedback is not a personal attack on their well-being, but it is information to help them grow and learn. Um, I always think a little competition's good. So in the classroom, if there's ways to create natural competition, that might be fun. But even creating a space to help our students understand that feedback is good, I think that can be a very, very powerful life lesson. And we all know in the workplace, we need to be able to give feedback and not have people take it personally and have that impact their confidence. We really want them to learn quickly, grow, and be able to perform better.
How do you work with athletic leaders to help them appreciate that huge responsibility that ultimately this translates to and hopefully not get overwhelmed by it? Because I can see how somebody who might come in with a typical kind of traditional top-down coaching mindset and all of a sudden, and I'm talking about athletic coaching mindset here, and all of a sudden they realize, wow, what I'm doing here can actually have an massively outsized, lifelong impact on those who are in their charge. How do you help them create that awareness and work through that awareness?
The first thing I'd say is similar to I'm going to relate it to student affairs employees. Similar to student affairs employees, most college coaches get into the business because they want to do that, Tim. They care very much about the holistic development of a student. Um, And yet I also shared with you, I was young. I was 25 years old when I was named as a head coach.
Wow.
I did not know what I did not know, and so um, many of those students that I was coaching back then were they were almost they were closer in age to me than I was to my boss. That's for sure. But one thing I do want to highlight, and this is something that's a challenge in the United States, we do not have a requirement, any sort of certification that is required for somebody to be a sport coach in higher education. If you go right now and look up any job description for a sport coach in higher ed, the minimum requirements will be something like a bachelor's degree in anything. And so we have work to do in this country in terms of helping those leaders understand that grave responsibility that they have, which is you know, like you mentioned, it's really about the holistic development of a human. Now there are things in place to help our coaches. The NCAA has more recently developed a holistic model that they instruct athletics departments to follow with the hopes of, you know, seeing more comprehensive programmatic efforts to develop our students. Part of that was taking a good look at the time requirements that we have for our athletes. You'll hear many stories, even at the University of Georgia, that football players are doing well above what we call our 20 hours of countable athletically related activities. The holistic model from the NCAA really took a look at that and said, can we better define this? Um, but to your point in asking the question, how do we help our leaders? I do think this is a place that is top down. It needs to be a value of the athletics director, and it needs to be part of the hiring conversations as you're recruiting coaches. You need to keep it as a North Star that this is about the development of human beings. And I'll be very honest, way easier to do that at George Washington University than it may be at one of those 54 schools that is that are bringing in those billions of dollars. Um, and you know, that's real. That's real.
So you already kind of preempted a little bit of a question I wanted to ask you to kind of start wrapping things up a little bit. Is if a university wanted to make an investment or a larger investment perhaps in its athletic leadership team by investing in coaching and bringing in some coaches, potentially some coaches who may not have worked in that space, where would you recommend that they start? And what advice may you have for coaches who may have the opportunity to work with athletic coaches, athletic leaders, to have a greater impact and to really move some of these programs forward?
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate this question, Tim. You know, one of the things that is constant with athletics leaders is that outcomes are important. And I would share with anybody that is looking to explore coaching um, in higher education, specifically athletics, that there are desired outcomes that an executive coach can help you with. And those desired outcomes, let's start with recruitment and retention, right? If our leaders are doing a better job understanding themselves, that's going to do them well. It's going to serve them well in the recruitment process and in the retention process. Those things are core to developing great teams. So, if we can focus on what potential outcomes could exist, I do think that makes executive coaching much more attractive to presidents and athletics directors and head coaches. um, you and I both know this. One of the things that we hear a ton about from our clients is, I just don't have time. And an argument that I like to make is, you actually don't have time to not do this. And 1 hour every every 2 weeks, right? Or 1 hour a month of investment in yourself so that your ripple can be what you want it to be so that you can get the desired outcomes that you're striving for is that's nothing. 1 hour, right? 1 hour. I would also say, when I think about athletics, one of the challenges I've faced in working with leaders is they're often very consumed with the fact that they can get fired from their job. Most head coaches, most athletics directors get fired from their jobs. That's a crazy idea, right? And so when I'm working with them, they are so aware that the behavior of their staff members, that the behavior of their student athletes can impact how their livelihood. It can impact their livelihood. So again, as we're talking about how do we approach leaders, this is for your longevity, right? This is for your professional growth and development. If you understand you better, right, you're going to be able to set an organization on the right track in order to you can't control 400, 500 students and the decisions that they make, but you can become a leader that makes um, the values, the mission, the purpose of an organization abundantly clear. You can become a leader where honesty is a core component of what we're doing. And so it's a psychologically safe organization where communication can flow freely so that we can learn about things before they become national news. We can learn about them at a much earlier point in time, so that we can attend to them as leaders. So I go back to this idea of outcomes are super important to athletics leaders. And if we can think about what those desired outcomes are and match that up with executive coaching, it can be a really beautiful partnership.
Speaking of beautiful, Tanya, I think you just wrapped things up beautifully. And as I like to say, these are words to live, lead, and coach by. Um, putting to the or bringing to the fore the outcomes that we as coaches can help these programs achieve. And these are very, very important outcomes that far exceed anything that has a dollar sign in front of it, but really has a massive impact on people and their futures. I think that's just a beautiful way of looking at it. Tanya, thank you so very much for your time, for your wisdom, for sharing your experience. I can't wait for this episode to air and for our listeners and viewers to let us know what they think about it. So thank you again.
Tim, thanks so much. I really enjoyed today's conversation.
I did too, very much so. And a big thank you goes to all our viewers and listeners. Your patronage really means a lot. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you're interested in more information on our guest, the topic, and our episode in general, please visit our companion website, higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. See you next time and keep making a difference, one client and one conversation at a time. Take care.